Hi, I think we're live. Can you hear me?
I can. Hi, Katie.
Hi, Carrie. Okay, so I'm just checking all the tech because that can go wrong sometimes. But I think we're in and I think we're good to go. We've got 16 people watching already. Brilliant. Okay, so hi, Carrie again. It's so brilliant to have you here in the group. We've got 26 people already tuned in to listen to all of your brilliant tips. So just to contextualize tonight, I've asked Carrie Swift to come in and talk to us all. I've been speaking to Carrie anyway over the last few months. Carrie is the founder of a business called Love Public Speaking. And Carrie advises individuals and companies on how to have confidence when presenting externally, large presentations, but more recently her business model has slightly changed because we're all in lockdown. So Carrie and I were chatting and we thought it would be a really great idea to get her on and to chat about how to navigate suddenly being on video all the time as opposed to in person, how to have the confidence to find your voice and be heard. And Carrie's got some brilliant tips on that. So Carrie, I'm going to hand over to you to give a little bit of background about you, the business, and how you came to run Love Public Speaking.
So a few years ago, I was working as a director in a communications agency. And although I was quite an outgoing person, I actually had this massive problem with public speaking. And I used to really kind of over prepare for presentations and get really nervous for meetings. And I ended up spending a fortune of my own money trying to get over my fear. And I found that actually a lot of the training didn't really help me that much because it didn't focus on the issue of confidence and anxiety enough. I just found it wasn't practical enough and it wasn't kind of focused on commercial scenarios enough. So I decided to launch my own company, which would help people, specifically kind of in the business environment, how to feel more confident with public speaking. And a few years on, we now work with businesses and schools and individuals to help them do that. So we do presentation skills training programs, pitch programs, and also women's leadership programs.
Sounds incredible. I also read in your bio, which I was just a bit astounded by, you actually trained people to pitch on the TV series Dragon's Den, which is absolutely brilliant. I would love to spend a bit of time talking to you about that, but we won't right now. That must have been fun.
Save that for another day.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so as I said, since lockdown, a lot of us are finding ourselves now on video conferences, maybe with large groups of people, and maybe it's not a comfort zone for some who are used to being sort of in person in meetings. And so working remotely has brought all sorts of new challenges. First of all, how are you adapting your business to this? And then I'm going to ask you to talk about how the people watching this should start to think and what your sort of tips and strategies for them are in that situation.
So what's happened for us? So at first we had all this work scheduled, which was face to face, and then all of a sudden, of course, we went into lockdown and it's all been postponed. And then lockdown has actually gone on longer than we were expecting, and it looks set to continue for quite a long time. So we've now converted all our training into virtual training. And we've had to kind of adapt it. So it's different, it's different in terms of the delivery, but we still do lots of speaking exercises online. And of course, we're teaching people how to present online because that's kind of a whole skill in itself. So I think for us, it's really been about trying to adapt to what the new need is, and design courses that are working for people during this time, and then perhaps slowly we'll move back to face-to-face training and socially distanced face-to-face training. But I think that's going to be a while yet.
Yeah. Okay. So when I saw your video on LinkedIn, I absolutely loved it, and I thought I've got to get you in to talk to the group. And you gave sort of 3 top tips for when you're online and presenting. How to be taken seriously, how to get more gravitas, how to get noticed on an online sort of video or a conference. So can you just share those with the group?
Sure. So my 3 tips for having more gravitas when you're speaking, either in real life or on an online call, are firstly to avoid using the upward inflection. So to demonstrate, you know, when people go up at the end of every sentence and it kind of sounds like they're asking a question. And actually, we're all in the habit of doing this, but it's quite deferential because it's saying, is this okay? And so rather than using the upward inflection, what you want to use is the downward inflection. So if you have an important statement to make, it should go down at the end of the sentence. So to give you an example, rather than saying, we're hoping to increase revenue by 20% next year, instead you say, we're looking to increase revenue by 20% next year. So tip number one is to avoid using the upward inflection and use the downward inflection instead. Tip number two is to speak slower. So when you're in an important meeting or when you're presenting, you want to speak about 20% slower than you would one-to-one, because people perceive you as having more gravitas when you speak slower, and also it gives you more time to formulate your ideas. So what comes out of your mouth makes more sense and you can enunciate properly. And the third tip I offered was to harness the power of silence. So interestingly, if you ever want to win a negotiation, the way to do it is actually to be the person that speaks less. And this is also how journalists do their work. So when they're interviewing people, what they do is they will create a void and other people step in and fill that space. So actually, when you are able to kind of hold a silence, what that shows is that you're really comfortable in your own skin, and it helps you to emphasize important points. So you could either pause at the beginning, pause at the end when you make an important statement, and it helps it land with more impact.
Sounds like some of this needs a bit of practice. I know that if I talked with an inflection that went up, I can hear the difference, but you'd have to really think about that. But I agree with you. Considered sort of silences have so much more impact. And I told you earlier when we were chatting that when I am in meetings, I am quite confident and I just want to get my words out. And actually, I think sometimes if you talk too fast and too quickly and gabble it, someone else can say it 5 minutes later and they can make exactly the same point in a different way with silences, and everyone goes, oh, that was exactly hit the nail on the head. You're like, I said that 5 minutes ago.
And they get the full credit.
And they get the full credit. So actually, I've already learned a lot. So I'm going to start using silences, which leads me on to personality types, which I just wanted to touch on with you, which is extroverts versus introverts. So just thinking about different behaviors. So if you're just quite naturally shy and you're on a video call, and we were talking earlier about sort of etiquette and people sort of leaving their camera off. And actually we were saying it's better to put it on. If you're naturally an introvert, shy person, and you're on a video call, you could get lost, couldn't you? And all the other extroverts would be talking. So what would your advice be to sort of how to stand out a bit on a video, on a conference call?
So I think with meetings in general, it's really important to prepare. And particularly if you are somebody shy who's going on to a video call and you've got an important point to make, I think that you have to go a few steps further and possibly think about things like how you set that call up so that you're chairing it in the first place. So perhaps you're going to send an agenda, perhaps you're going to think really carefully about how you structure your message and actually rehearse saying the difficult things that you need to say out loud. Perhaps you'll try out the exercise of divide and conquer, which would be that you're going to get some people, have some one-to-ones first and get some support for your idea before you speak. You know, I think actually with any kind of meeting, it's about preparing for it really well and having a really clear message. And it's not necessarily about who kind of shouts the loudest. You don't always want to do that. It's about finding other ways to get that message across.
You can get quite lost on a video call when there's lots of people, and you can just take it as an opportunity to not speak because you're not in the room. So I think it's just about people realizing that they need to maintain their sort of profile in the organization and maintain that voice.
Yeah, and also, you know, another thing that I think people do is it's easy to forget when you're not speaking that you can be seen. Yeah. And actually, I think it's really important that you kind of show up and be present and you look engaged and you show support for the speaker. because it's really distracting when somebody else is moving around a lot when you're presenting. I think you do kind of remember who's giving you that support and who looks like they're listening. So I think my experience of doing these kind of calls is that it's very easy, because of the geographical distance, to not do your kind of personal branding in the way that you normally would, and put as much effort in as you normally would. But actually, in some ways, this kind of channel requires us to tune in even more to those things, and sometimes to put a little bit more effort in. So if we're speaking on a call, we're kind of making our point, we probably have to work a little bit harder to do things like be engaging, get a musicality into our voice, to try and keep the energy up, to try and keep the call really pacey, to kind of bring some positivity to the call when everybody's feeling a bit low and a bit demotivated.
And I think then there's an etiquette, and there's sort of a requirement on behalf of the person who's running the meeting as well, to make sure that everybody gets a chance to speak. And so sort of in the same way you do a round table, you sort of do that on a call, so that everyone gets their moment to talk, as opposed to just the people who are confident enough to speak up.
Exactly. And actually that is a technique we use called signposting. So it's where, and we have to do it on conference calls or with channels like this, where you're kind of giving quite clear instructions on who speaks next. So if I'm chairing a call and there's a few people on it, I'm going to say, welcome everybody, here's who we've got on the call. I'm going to speak now for 10 minutes and give an update on this. Then I'm going to hand over to this person. And at this point, there's opportunity for questions. So what that means is that the call has some kind of structure, so that you get everything covered, rather than everybody speaking over each other.
And it's much harder, I think, on a video than in person, because you've got that sort of relationship and you can see and read the room, whereas you can't read the room so well. So that's really good advice, I think, for people who are running meetings as well. To have that confidence,
it's about
create structure.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's just talk about the etiquette as well, because when we chatted, we talked about how you turn up for these things, and we had a little bit of a giggle, didn't we? Because I was sort of telling you about yesterday when I sort of turned up and the screen was the wrong way round, and I had an awful outfit, and I upside down, and I'd forgotten it was a video call, and I didn't have any makeup on, and I just looked like an absolute wreck. And you said, we laughed about it, but then you said, tell us your views on sort of the etiquette of video conferencing. Should we all be sitting in our pajamas?
I think that having that kind of professional distance that we have at work is quite useful. And for me personally, I like to keep a little bit of that even when I'm joining a call from my house. So that means that I'm not going to turn up to the call in a suit, because that would look ridiculous, because that's not how I dress at home. But I probably will go kind of smart casual. I'm probably going to be a little bit groomed. I'm going to think about what's in the background and how much of my life I want to share. And I want to try and bring as much professionalism to the call as I can, just because it makes my life easier later if I'm having to, if it's a client I'm having to kind of negotiate with, or if I'm dealing with my boss. I think those things are quite worth thinking about. But inevitably, you might get distractions. You might have, dog running in and out of the room, kids running in and out of the room, and that stuff you can't help. And I think that actually everybody's going to forgive that, because there's nothing you can do about it. We're all in lockdown. But I think where you can, for me personally, I like to try and bring a bit of professionalism, because apart from anything else, it actually changes how you behave. The way that you dress, and the way that you sit, and the way that you hold yourself. We know that it impacts our behaviour. So it's kind of easier to get into work mode, I think, when you approach calls in that way.
I agree. So message from Carrie is we can all be forgiving because we're in lockdown, so we can have distractions. Like we all saw that brilliant BBC presenter, didn't we, when his kids walked in and the stroller. But yeah, I agree with you. I think just sort of turning up and looking presentable and in work mode just sets the scene a bit better, rather than sort of Okay, so we've talked a little bit about sort of employed people who are going online and having video calls and how they should behave and the environment they should be in. But we've also got lots of people in the group who run their own businesses and who are having to think about keeping their sort of profile alive. And there's a lot of people who are really afraid and nervous and lack confidence in sort of going online and doing Facebook Lives like this. They can be really nerve-wracking. And sort of building up that sort of rapport with your clients and keeping that going through online and digital. So what, and people are terrified. I know it's really, really nerve-wracking. So what's your advice to people who sort of need to up their game and deliver some online videos and stuff? How should they start thinking?
So I think it is just really, really important that you find a way to just do it. And actually, you know, I think there's a common misconception that those of us who are doing this kind of thing find it easy or easier, and we don't. It's hard and it requires preparation, but it is 100% worth it, and it's such a great opportunity to do your marketing. So what I always say to people is, start taking baby steps of doing things, you know, a Facebook Live or a mini interview or something like that. But don't set the bar impossibly high. You know, if it's not the most articulate you've ever been, if it's not your absolute best performance, if it's a bit amateur, that's absolutely fine. The important thing is that you kind of get the hours of practice in, and that you get that visibility in the first place. So I think, and I say this with public speaking as well, it's really about just finding, taking a few chances and finding the courage to do it, but not beating yourself up about it afterwards. Okay. Because obviously the more you practice, the more you desensitize. And I also say to people, don't just do it, you know, once a month or once a week. Try and do it 3 times a week, something that's slightly outside of your comfort zone. And after a while, it just doesn't feel like such a big deal anymore.
And what about sort of preparing? Would you script it or would you go off the cuff? Like, how do you plan your content for stuff like this? So if you're going online and you are a bit nervous, I presume planning your content and doing all that stuff is really important.
Yeah, I think that people think that people who are doing lots of public appearances are speaking off the cuff, and often they're not. You know, if you see people doing BBC interviews, that's not the first time they've been asked that question. They have been media trained, they have rehearsed their answers, they practice their key messages. And even for me as a speaker, I'm going out and I'm talking about what we do all the time, and I'm talking about our kind of key messages and the ways that we want to help people. But this is stuff that I talk about all the time. So actually what you do is you prepare your content in advance. And if you were doing something like a video, for example, a video with some tips on whatever it is you're offering, I would say, yeah, you do kind of script it first, but then just make a few key bullet points and you talk around each bullet point. So you're not reciting a script. It's kind of most impromptu speaking, but it's structured, pre-prepared impromptu speaking. I think that's the way to do it, because ultimately it's about you putting the thought and effort into producing quality content that's going to serve your market.
I think something that's coming out of our conversation is that whatever medium you're doing and however you're doing it, preparation gives you confidence. So how do you have gravitas confidence? If you have thought about it in advance, if you don't go off the cuff, if you've prepared, and whether you're online or in person or standing up in front of everybody, you've already gone through sort of that thinking, which gives you the confidence to be able to have those conversations, whether that's 100%. One-to-one or one-to-many.
Yeah,
okay,
absolutely. So, and in every situation, you know, with every a job interview that you do, with every video that you make, every meeting you go to, every presentation you do, every 5-minute meeting that you get with your CEO, when you just catch him or her and you know that they're just passing through and you ask to have a quick coffee, I think those meetings are actually worth preparing for. You just make sure that you're really clear on what your key message is.
Yeah, and I also think, just going back to the introvert extrovert bit, I think that's really important, because I think a lot of sort of more quieter, more introverted people feel like they don't get heard, and You know, it's always the gobby ones, you know, who are sort of chatting. That doesn't mean they've got anything more or better to say. It's just they're more confident about putting themselves forward. So it's just about getting yourself over that line, isn't it? So that, you know, you've got that, you give yourself the platform to be able to speak.
Exactly. And it's also just, it's kind of breaking through that pain barrier of saying the thing that needs to be said. You know, I feel like the people that end up kind of progressing are the ones that, however hard it is to do that presentation or to have that difficult conversation, or to put themselves out, they will find a way to do it. And this is why I talk a lot about not feeling like you have to be perfect all the time, because women in particular struggle with that. And, you know, actually it's better to take some risks and make a few mistakes along the way, but actually to have those opportunities and to be heard and to be someone that stands out as saying what needs to be said.
Well, I love that. And I think that's something I really struggle with. I think that, and others too, I think that we strive for perfection. And so we don't bother doing it sometimes because we think, well, if it's not perfect, but you know what, just having a go and doing it and putting yourself out there is, you know, there's always going to reap more rewards than not doing it at all. So
exactly. And it doesn't have to be perfect. You know, I've got stuck up on my wall over here, produce, don't perfect. Because it was something
done, yeah, just do it. Doesn't, yeah.
It's something that I always struggled with, and it's the reason why for years I had a fear of public speaking, because I would avoid speaking at work. I would just do, you know, the one big presentation a quarter, and it felt like such a big deal.
Yeah.
And there were other people, you know, a few male directors in particular, who didn't seem to be that bothered about whether they had the accurate, you know, the accurate data to share in presentations, but would just go off and do them and make a few blunders along the way, but then got really good at it because they were practicing all the time. So I think it is about taking those risks.
And having that confidence and taking those risks is what's going to propel you forward in your career. Just sort of
exactly
more visibility. Okay, so a lot of people listening, or a number of people listening, will sadly be going through some challenging times at the moment. Lots of people are being furloughed, and sadly lots of people are also being made redundant and losing their jobs. And so there's going to be a lot more people looking for jobs and having to do video interviews, which is again a different prospect. So we don't want to get too deep into it, but when you're doing a video interview or an online interview, it is different to in person. In person, you have that journey, you get there, you know, you get to build a rapport. What advice would you give to, or tips would you give to anybody who's going through an interview online?
So I would say, because it is so difficult to build rapport in this situation, the best that you can do is what we always recommend people do when they're public speaking, which is that you have a half smile, really practical tip, a half smile for the whole call, because it's just about showing that warmth when you can't necessarily do it, you know, with your energy in real life.
What is a half smile, Carrie?
So it's what I'm giving now. So let me show you the difference. I'm going to talk to you without this smile. So I can talk through my content in a different way without smiling, and actually it changes the quality of my voice and somehow makes the call really serious. Whereas when I'm smiling a bit more, you'll just warm to me. Can you see the difference?
I can. I do a lot of smiling, yes.
So definitely, yes. I'd say, you know, try to build your rapport by smiling and making sure that you look really engaged. But also, I think, understand the channel, which is that, as I mentioned before, this kind of call does need structure. It is going to be chaired by them, and they will let you know when to speak and when not to. And unfortunately, you know, if you're trying to have small talk or banter in this kind of on this kind of channel, there's a little bit of a delay, and it doesn't always work that well. So it's a slightly more regimented call, probably slightly more regimented interview, but that's okay to show that you understand that and you understand how to use this channel. And then, of course, just make sure that, as with any kind of interview, that you've done your preparation and you've rehearsed a few answers and you actually do that out loud. Because I think that people think through your answers, but they don't necessarily practice saying them. But any kind of communication exercise like that, you want to actually rehearse it out loud.
Okay, well, you talked to me earlier about your furlough challenge. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I've got so many friends that are furloughed and they're feeling really demotivated at the moment and really bored and really purposeless. So I've decided that we are going to launch a furlough interview challenge where we invite people who have been furloughed to send in to us a video where they have to answer 3 interview questions. So the interview questions are: talk about your 3 greatest strengths, talk about the lessons you've learned during lockdown, and tell us about how you predict COVID-19 is going to change the future of your industry. And those people that get themselves together and send us a video and give it their best shot, we're going to give the first 10 of them feedback from our expert trainers. So it's kind of some free training for the first 10 people that do that, because I thought it would just be really nice to
Hang on, Carrie, I've lost sound.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I've got you back now.
Did you catch that?
I think everyone else did, but I didn't because I lost the sound. But you've invited everybody to send in answers to your 3 questions.
Yeah, so basically what we're doing is we're inviting people to take our furlough interview challenge, where they will answer some interview questions and they'll do it all on camera. They'll record it on their phone, they send it in to us, and the first 10 people that send it in will get a video training session with our trainers, so they get some expert feedback.
And when does that open? Can our
Monday.
Okay, fantastic.
This coming Monday.
I love that. So I would say to anybody who's listening to this who has been furloughed to get involved, because that is a fantastic way of working out your pitch, your elevator pitch, your who am I? And actually, you're right, it's the practicing bit, isn't it? It's the, when I get asked that question, how am I going to say it? And actually by recording it, going through that process, you can actually hear yourself back for
exactly
how the answer actually sounds.
Exactly. And also it's just good, I think at this point it's good for you to think, what are my sort of core strengths, and practice talking about those, because I think that people are really losing confidence during this time. It's not, it's not very nice being furloughed, because you can feel a bit left out of things and you've got too much time on your hands to think. So I think it's good to have these kind of little challenges to keep you moving.
So that leads me nicely on. I think we're coming to the end of our half an hour. You've given some brilliant practical tips. I hope everyone's found it really useful. I'm not sure if there are any questions. I just went to have a look, which is when I lost my sound, and I couldn't see any. So what I would suggest is you just tell people now how they can get hold of you and reach out to you. I mean, I follow you on LinkedIn, but we'll drop it in the comments. But you just want to tell people how to get in touch.
Sure. So my company is Love Public Speaking, and we're at www.lovepublicspeaking.org. I'm also on Facebook, Carrie L. Swift, and on LinkedIn as Carrie Swift, and we're also on Twitter. And we're doing loads of video tips at the moment on all the stuff that we've been talking about today. So if you subscribe to our website, you can get those in mail shots, and I also have a YouTube channel, Carrie Swift, so you can have a look at tips on there too.
Amazing. And I would say if you're doing this from Monday, then anyone in the group who's interested should get their video and sent over to Carrie, because that's brilliant if it gets reviewed and then critiqued. I love it.
Absolutely. And also, if anybody has some downtime and wants to do some training during this period, we're also doing online virtual training with coaching sessions where we look at your presenting technique, we look at your interview style, or if you've got your own business, we look at things like your elevator pitch and give you feedback on that and work on things like your gravitas. So those are options as well.
Brilliant, love it. Okay, well, thank you so much, Carrie. We focused today on sort of your confidence gravitas online because we're in lockdown, but Carrie's already said she's going to come back once we come out of lockdown, because obviously at the moment we're not face to face, but one of the things that you train a lot on is how to perfect your public speaking and present to larger audiences. So we didn't feel that was hugely relevant for tonight, but Carrie is going to come back and do that at a future date. So hopefully when we come out of lockdown, we'll get onto it. So thank you so much for joining us. I loved the session. It's going to be available for people to watch on catch up. And Carrie will pop into the group and have a look at the comments. If anyone's got any questions, you can either pop them in the thread or contact Carrie directly, and I know that she will respond and come back to you. And I would tell you to follow Carrie on LinkedIn because her content's brilliant, absolutely brilliant. So thank you so much. Have a good evening, Casey. And we'll speak soon. Bye everyone.
Thanks. Bye everyone.
Bye.